Okay. Well, I think I put my hair back in. uh,
Okay.
uh, Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you for your patience. Disruption in technology is not fun, but I'm glad we're all here together to celebrate such an amazing person, Sharon Davis-Murdoch. First, I would like to acknowledge uh, that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of Mi'kmaq people. This territory is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship. I'd also like to acknowledge that racism in race is North America's original sin. That is the root of all current social inequities. Acts of reconciliation and reparations, both symbolic and substantial, are critical to our collective emancipation and ability to live peacefully and sustainably on this land. So this is the first um, of our celebrations for African Nova Scotians and immigrants living in Scotia. Um, it's the second year the Brotherhood's done this, and tonight we are celebrating Sharon Murdoch Davis.
Sharon Davis-Murdoch, thank you.
Sharon Davis. I'm
I always tell
tongue tied.
people, Brother Dwayne, I always tell people, think of it as, remember Shoppers Drug Mart, then you'll never get it wrong.
So we're tonight we are celebrating Sharon's accomplishments, which is very fast, very fast, and so much. And her son Chris Murdoch will be I guess, the MC on the Zoom. Thank you, Chris, for doing this, and thank you for the patience you had with me, bugging you every 5 minutes. But the floor is yours, and thank you, everyone. And please enjoy. And just some etiquette. Um, Chris is going to speak, and while he's speaking, and in Sharon speaking, could you please put your mics on mute? Um, and please enjoy, and we'll have questions after. Thank you again.
Son, I'm going to pretend it's just you and me in the kitchen, okay?
I'm going to do exactly the same thing, Mom. Just to get things started, I want to say my proper thank you. So I do want to thank the Nova Scotia Brotherhood for putting this series on. I'd like to thank specifically Dwayne Winter for inviting me to do this. It's a great opportunity. And I want to thank all of you for attending this evening. My name is Chris Murdoch. I know some of you from specifically from working at Nova Scotia Community College, where I've worked for almost a decade in various roles, but most recently as a student advisor, which is a job I absolutely love and relish. But more importantly than that, I am the son and only child of the person we are celebrating tonight, which is my mother, Sharon Davis-Murdoch. I'm pleased, Mom, to hear you say that you're going to pretend that it's just you and me, because I was saying to Dwayne when he invited me to do this that I think the best way to go about it is to just have it be a casual conversation, because I can't have it be any other way, because you're my mother. I give lots of presentations. I've done interviews before, and of course they always have a formal air to them. And I can't be formal with you because you are my mom, and I've known you my entire life, and you are obviously one of the most important people in my life, and it couldn't be any other way. So what I want to do is I do want to read the wonderful introduction that was put together by the Nova Scotia Brotherhood to formally introduce you, I suppose. And then I just want to have a conversation with you, and people can watch, and I'll turn things over at the end back to Dwayne. I'm much more familiar with Microsoft Teams than I am with Zoom, so I'm not sure how the question pane works and all that. So Dwayne, when my mother and I are finished, I'll turn things over to you for any questions and things like that. But if that's okay to you, Mom, we can go ahead and get started.
Okay, you can skip a lot of it, okay? Let's just chat.
For sure. This is the only formal piece that there will be, because I want our chat to be very informal. But what's important to me, Mom, is that I do want to make sure that within this recording that I can't say all, because of course we can't capture all of your accomplishments on paper, but I want to make sure that some of your most critical accomplishments are mentioned. And this is a way I can guarantee that happens, just in case we don't get to it in our conversation. So quickly, I'm just going to go through. If you're okay, I'll ask your permission. You're my mom after all.
All right, you're just, you know, it's really hard. My glasses are steaming. I'm gonna be weeping before too long. It's just a little bit hard, but I'm doing my best. I'm holding
All
on.
right.
All right.
Well, it's a celebration of you, and I want to talk about fun stuff, and I want to you know, I'll get to it after this, but let's go through it somewhat quickly. I will say Sharon Davis-Murdoch, my mother, a member of the Order of Canada, is undoubtedly a social justice champion. Retired from the Nova Scotia Public Service, Sharon's political science background and public policy experience informs her work in community. Among her public policy accomplishments was the development of the first provincial guidelines for culturally competent primary health care in Canada. In December of 2021, not that long ago, Sharon was named to the Order of Canada for her dedication to improving the health equity and inclusion of racialized communities in Nova Scotia, which, by the way, Mom, is pretty tremendous. Sharon received Premier's Awards of Excellence in 2007 and 2015. In 2018, Sharon received the Inspiration Award from the Dalhousie School of Public Administration, awarded to public servants who have demonstrated a superior dedication and commitment to mentoring, coaching, and inspiring students and public servants over the course of their careers. Sharon works at the community level and is a founding member and the co-president of the Health Association of African Canadians. Additional to that role, she now serves as co-manager to the Association of Black Social Workers and the Health Association of African Canadians, as well as the COVID-19 response and impact team. She is also an advisor to the Halifax Immigrant Partnership and secretary of the Dartmouth General Hospital Foundation Board. A very, very busy lady. President of Shamar Devon Consulting, Sharon was appointed and served as commissioner on the Independent Commission on Effective Electoral Representation of Acadian and African Nova Scotians. In October of 2020, Sharon was selected as one of the Black women leaders for the Black Women in Leadership, Sharing and Shaping Our Journey online conference. Sharon is a proud member of the Dartmouth community and an even prouder Nana of two growing boys, who, by the way, my partner Stephanie is tucking into bed just above me. So in case any noise seeps through, if you hear any crying or protests of bedtime, I do apologize, but there's not too much I can do about it. Mom, you understand all too well, I know. So there's a few things that I want to ask you about, Mom, and you know, I relish the opportunity to do this for a few reasons. But one is that given everything that's going on in our lives, me having two small children and all of us navigating the pandemic, even though you are my mother, and even though, for those who may not know, we live maybe 13 doors apart, we're very close to each other, it is rare that I have an opportunity to sit down with you and just have a nice talk for more than a couple of minutes. So I really, really appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak to you about that. And I'm also happy to be able to dive a little bit more into you and your life, because obviously I know you, but I always feel like I can know you a little bit better. And I feel like this is an opportunity to do that. So I want to start at the beginning, and that is, Mom, the beginning of you. I want to spend some time talking about who you are and where you're from. So maybe just to get things started, you could talk a little bit about the beginning of your life, where you were born, your family. Maybe just give some background into the very beginning of you, if you don't mind.
All right, darling. So the very beginning of me, I used to put it in a little kind of paragraph like this. I was born in the West End. No, I was born in the East End of London, which is where, London, England, where if any of you are familiar with EastEnders, you know that's like not exactly, you know, it's real hood in lots of ways. But we were also, as I'm told, because I do not remember London, do not remember England, but I was told that we lived in rather a diverse neighborhood even then. So I was born at home to a beautiful mom and dad. Mom from, well, I'll get to that later. So born in the East End, grew up in the West End of Bermuda. So I was only 18 months old when my mother, this happens to a lot of West Indian people. My mom was concerned that my grandmother, who lived in Bermuda, was, she was struggling along in Bermuda for a number of reasons. And so she wanted me to go to Bermuda to kind of be with her, live with her. It happens in Caribbean families. So, and so I went to Bermuda at 18 months old. So Bermuda is really the only country I remember in terms of being a child. So I grew up there. And so born in the East End, grew up in the West End of Bermuda. And now I live uptown, down east. So I moved from Bermuda to Nova Scotia as a university student. I first actually went to Mount A in Sackville, New Brunswick, and had culture shock 3 times over because it was rural. It was so predominantly Eurocentric that I couldn't even find a course on politics from anywhere except Europe. And I thought, you know what, this is not the education I'm looking for. So after 2 years of that, it's a fantastic university. Please don't send me any emails about it. It's a very good university, first rate. But for me and my experience, I wanted something different. So I transferred to Dal and got into the political science program there. And it was at Dal that, I was quite young. I took a gap year after high school so that I could work in Bermuda and gain some work experience. But then I moved to Dal, I'm sorry, to Mount A and then Dal. And it was at Dal that I met your dad. So literally within a few months of being at Dal, I met your dad. Less than that, actually. And we were both 21. We've been together ever since. And we made a conscious decision a long time ago that this would be our home because we wanted to be here. We wanted to raise a family here. We wanted to connect in Nova Scotia to African Nova Scotians because we didn't want to live as people who were not connected to our people. That's how we saw it. And so we were very determined to make a life here. Now, it sounds really, really quick, like it was one easy thing, one after the other, and it wasn't, because when your dad and I, we were together, as I say, from his first year in medical school. And what happened was that throughout sort of the second and third year, you have to kind of decide what you're going to do. If you're going to be a family doc and are you going to practice, what's your residency going to be, and this sort of thing. Well, there weren't any opportunities for residencies for Black students, I can tell you, from the Caribbean. And as you know, of course, your dad was born in Antigua, but spent most of his, in fact, I would say from age 15 till now, your dad's lived in Canada. He was in Manitoba from the time he was 15 and then came here to med school. So during that time, he couldn't get a position. And the only way that he could remain in Canada was to work where no Canadian doctor wanted to work. So lo and behold, that place existed in Nova Scotia, and that was in Freeport, Nova Scotia. Again, a beautiful, really lovely island off of Digby Neck, but remote would be an understatement. And you were born after 2 years in Freeport, when we were in Freeport, and you know, without giving away far too much of your personal stuff, I just want to say that, you know, your birth story was one that also prompted my passion for health policy reform, because you were born, you came, I hope you don't mind, son. You came early. You came early, and as a result, and that is something that I know my sister and dear friend, Dr. Omishure, would know all about, because Black women very often have preemies and low weight babies. Didn't know it was going to happen to me, but there you go. So you came early, and we were on the island. and your dad was like, oh my God, what are we going to do? Because it was one of those nor'easters. And in order to get to to where we live, you had to get on a ferry from Digby and drive all the way down to the island. Like you had to drive all the way from sort of Digby Neck all the way down to Freeport. So there I was, you know, fully ready to have a baby prematurely, and your dad had to insist that they cross the ferry because he, you know, it could have been dangerous, and so they didn't want to, but what could they do? So some kind man, and there were lots of kind people on Freeport, beautiful people who were so good to us. He, the ferry guy, he crossed us, and then we drove up the island in an ambulance. And again, another angel from Freeport. His name was Gil Bates. I don't know if anybody on here would know him, but he's gone now, but he was so good to us. And he drove us up the island, and you were born in Digby as a premature baby, and I didn't see you till several days after, because you had to go to the IWK. So, you know, those things, that rural experience, that coming, you know, having to drive up on icy roads, your dad saying, you know, sort of help coaching me along, he might have had to deliver you. And, you know, there it was. So all my life, I've lived in interesting times. and I have understood Nova Scotia from the most rural to the most urban. And so there it is. So I don't know if that tells you, you know, how I came to be in the world and how I came to be here, but do ask away if I've left anything out.
Well, that covers a lot of ground, because essentially what you've done is you've answered concisely probably the first half of questions that I was going to ask you, which is just fine. And I thank you for that. And I think maybe if you're okay with it, maybe what we can do is backtrack a little bit and expand on some what I think are important points that you made in that succinct version of all the things that you've gone through in that particular period of your life. If we can go back to Bermuda for a bit, where you grew up, right, until you pursued post-secondary education. Can you talk maybe a little bit about your family unit in Bermuda? You know, your mother, of course, my grandmother, someone who was part of our family unit and lived with us, you, me, and Dad for a very long time and a very long part of her senior years. You know, I feel very fortunate to have grown up with her. But you know, I know her very well from that period of her life, but I'm always curious to know a little bit more about her back then in Bermuda and her with you, and of course my wonderful aunts, who, if they're not watching this now, I'm sure they'll be watching it at some point. So you know, I for that time period, I'm wondering if you can just talk a little bit more about the family dynamic, and if you could, if it's relevant, maybe the social dynamics of life in Bermuda, and perhaps how that may have informed where you are career-wise today.
Well, okay. I would be remiss not to kind of repeat what I said when I was interviewed after receiving this amazing, humbling honor of the Order of Canada. I have to tell you that your great-grandparents were pioneers, and it is absolutely appropriate that I should tell you a little bit about them. Dr. Gordon, his name was Edgar Fitzgerald Gordon, was quite a person, quite a man. He was born in Trinidad and went to, he was, you know, one of these sort of bright young men, up and comers, but he was also a Black man in Trinidad and in the West Indies. Of course, there was, I think, quite a common need that people felt to go to be educated in the UK. And Dr. Gordon was no exception. So he was accepted, which is something in and of itself. I have some notes because it's, how would I know, you know, exactly what years were there, what years he was born and moved to Bermuda eventually. He was born in 1895. And when entering Bermuda, he did so in response to a request for a Black doctor, because Bermuda was so segregated and so racist that for Black people to have access to medical care, you know, they had to have a Black doctor. So there were only, I think, in the history of Bermuda before him, you know, very, very few. I mean, this was early days. Mm-hmm. So in 1912, he entered the University of Edinburgh in Scotland to study medicine. And there, believe it or not, he met your great-grandmother, and her name was Clara Christian. And Clara Christian was the first Black woman to ever enter the University of Edinburgh Medical School. Oh, wow. So the two of them were medical students in the early 1900s, 1912. And they fell in love. And as is, again, often the case, Dr. Gordon, your great-grandfather, was doing exceptionally well in medical school, but she was actually doing better. She excelled. Problem was that her father was able to pay for her expenses, and his father in Trinidad was running into some huge financial problems.
Mhm.
And thus, as is very often the woman's way, she gave up medical school to marry him and to use her support to support him. And so there it was, that was where it ended for her, but she would have been an exceptional physician. And indeed, she was an exceptional woman. And beyond medical school, she also, actually before medical school, but get this, before medical school, she was trained as an opera singer. That was her love. Her love was singing. And her father said to her, well, now that you've done what you love, you do what you're told and go to medical school. Anyway, she did, and she excelled. So, but there they were, the two of them in Edinburgh, two Black people. And he was able to get a position in Inverness. Isn't it funny? Inverness in Scotland, okay?
Yeah.
Who
Not
would have
Cape
thought, right? So there they were in Inverness, and it was at that time that shortly after that he got the call to, asking whether he would be willing to come and practice in Bermuda. Going to Bermuda then, he was stunned by the beauty of the island, but he was also extraordinarily offended by the level of racism and the segregation that was institutionalized in Bermuda, to the point where, though he was a practicing physician, paid very often by, people who didn't have money and would give him, vegetables and so on and so forth. That's the way it was. But he did have some money, and frankly, my grandmother had more. So because she continued to be a major contributor to the household economy, let's put it that way, they were able to live somewhat comfortably. And he then, using his position of relative privilege, became a parliamentarian, a civil rights leader, and the father of the trade union movement in Bermuda. And he, according to any biography you will read about him, he championed the cause of Bermudian workers and fought tirelessly for equal rights for Black Bermudians, laying the groundwork for much of the political and social change that came about after his death. He fought also to on behalf of Black nurses. Again, who would have thought? And it was through a series of letters to the local newspaper in Bermuda, the Royal Gazette, beginning in 1929, that he criticized the Bermuda Welfare Society for its refusal to hire Black nurses to be district nurses. He fought for nurses, he fought for workers, he ran for parliament. A very interesting story that I know my brothers and sisters will appreciate is that in parliament, they would try to talk down to him, they would not afford him the respect that he so deserved. And so he would, even the Speaker of the House would call on him, parliamentary debate. You're familiar with that because you've been around this house for a while. And when he would be called on to speak, instead of being called the Honorable, Dr. Gordon, they would call him Gordon. just say his name and not afford him the respect or the title that others would be. And one day he just got a little tired. And he said, look, don't call me anything except Mzumbo. Call me Mzumbo. And they laughed and they laughed and they thought that was a great, great funny joke. But Mzumbo, in an African language that I'm not sure, I see some African brothers and sisters out there, they probably know, but I think it means something like king, okay? So Mzumbo was what he was known as in Parliament, and also by Black Bermudians who would talk about him as Mzumbo, because in that way they afforded him respect. And so he and my grandmother lived in the West End of Bermuda, Somerset, Bermuda, and were very active, obviously, in all kinds of ways in terms of social justice causes. My grandmother did her own share of mentoring and supporting people. They had together 4 girls and 2 boys, and every one of your great aunts were started out as nurses.
Right.
And my mom also practiced nursing in England during World War II. She was a young nurse, right, and in fact had to escape bombs during the London Blitz. And you remember that in her obituary, it was written that she would do this. She would have to go to the underground to escape the bombing in London. Anyway, eventually, she was married to a young lawyer in Bermuda. I'm sorry, in England, and then that marriage failed, and she met and married my father. And it was after I was born and sent ahead to Bermuda that both my parents joined me, as it were, in Bermuda. So it was in Bermuda then. I had to give you that background so that you will understand also the atmosphere, the reality of racism, anti-Black racism in Bermuda, and the political chops that I was born into. Okay, the fact that my grandparents and my mother and dad had to fight so hard just to survive, just to be able to go to school, just to be able to excel. And my father was your granddad, Eric Davis, was born and raised in Guyana. We are a family of migrants. We come from everywhere, but when we come and we decide what's going to be home, we stay there. As did my grandparents when Bermuda was their home. They were there, and that is where they stayed from those young years until the end. And sadly, to my mind, they did separate. But as Catholics, and we are a strong, or you come from strong Catholic roots, fair enough. But there was no divorce, so they couldn't divorce my grandparents. My mom was growing when she moved to Bermuda, had to fight to find work and so on. She had to, the first marriage was annulled in order for her to stay a nurse. I'm sorry, in order for her to find work, she had to give up nursing, because when a nurse in the 30s who was in training decided to marry, she could no longer be a nurse. Do you see what I'm saying? You were, because at that time it was a requirement that you stay single so that you could be married to the profession of nursing. So my poor mom, again, you know, following the footsteps, I guess, of her mother, sacrificed her career so that she could be the wife to her first husband, because that's how it was. And then she worked in any way that she could to support the family. And then eventually that marriage was annulled. Won't get into that. But when she married my dad, it was pretty hard times. And again, she had come from a childhood that was privileged, but she worked in a very, in some really hard jobs in factories and so on. So this all preceded coming to Bermuda, and this again explains the trajectory of our lives, where understanding on the one hand that you have come from privilege or that you know privilege, but on the other hand, living real lives where injustice and poverty even is part of your experience. It shapes you, it forms you. And when I was 9, I believe it was, Dr. King was assassinated. I was in Catholic school. My parents we didn't even own our own home, but my parents put any money they had into my education. They believed so strongly in that. And so I was at Catholic school, and I was, of course, one of like maybe 10 Black kids in a whole school. And I want to tell you about the first day of school. So remind me, son, remind me about that. But
Okay.
But when I was at Mount St. Agnes, I was 9 at the time of Dr. King's death. And I remember that my mom took me to the African Methodist Episcopalian Church for Dr. King's memorial service. And I said, I think our dear friend, Dr. Josephine Atawa, who gave the obituary at Granny's funeral mass, said this. She said that I had told her that at 9 years old, I became a civil rights champion. I knew all the time up until then, even, what it was to have to fight for justice. But on that day, and I in recounting this, we are in our kitchen because I'm going to try not to get emotional. But on that day, Chris, I saw Black men cry for the first time in my life. And I was so moved by that. And I knew that it had to be that whatever I was going to do in my life, that I had to also fight for justice. And so, you know, that was kind of the way it was. And so even in the Catholic school, you know, there was and I've said this to people before, hopefully I'm not going to bore anybody, but even at that time, there was influence from Catholicism at the time, because I was sort of able to understand what liberation theology was at a young age, and liberation theology includes faith that is in action around social justice. So I was influenced from that, from my home, from going to a school with very, very wealthy, predominantly white Bermudians, coming back to my working class neighborhood, surrounded by people who I loved and grew up with, and you know, they were in my house, I was in their house, we loved each other. But I went every day in my uniform to the Catholic school because my parents wanted me to get the best education that they could afford. And I asked about you to remind me about the first day of school. Before
Yes.
I could get into Catholic school, there was a waiting list. Okay, so it wasn't easy to do. But on the first day of my school, my parents again decided that they were going to try to give me the best education that they could. At the bottom of the lane of or the hill of the house that I lived in Somerset, Bermuda, there was a school called Sandy's Grammar School. And it was an all-white school.
Mhm.
And I was 5 years old. And they said, no, we want her to go to the school that's closest to where we live. And we know that it has a reputation as being a good school. It was a government school. And so there I was, the first day of school. It reminds me of the story out of Little Rock, Arkansas, where the Black kid goes to the school and, there weren't any policemen around, but there should have been. That's how hostile it was.
Mhm.
And on that very first day, I was called the N-word.
Mhm.
That was my first day of school. So how could I not be socialized towards social justice? How could I not understand what racism meant individually, societally, structurally? I understood it in my gut from the time I can remember. And so the road toward political science and to the career that I had in public policy was a natural. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Mom. I think it's really important to lay that foundation. And I do see some really interesting questions popping up in the chat. I didn't think I'd be able to, but again, I think maybe I'll leave that to the end. I'll let Dwayne go over that. Yeah, that's incredible to hear all that. Some of those things I knew and some I did not. So good, even as your son, this is great learning for me. I think speaking about school in general is a good segue to talk about your post-secondary experience. And you already mentioned attending Mount Allison and then sort of transferring over to Dalhousie and pursuing your life from there. But something I'm so curious about, especially within the work I do now, working with a lot of young international students, some of whom are coming to Nova Scotia from Caribbean countries, it's always interesting to learn about why people are making that choice or what first got them interested. And the reasons that people might make that choice now may be similar or maybe different than yourself, given the time period that you started your post-secondary education. So really where I'm going with this is I'm so curious to know you completing your secondary level education in Bermuda and making a decision as to where you wanted to go from there. I'm wondering what first ignited the spark for Atlantic Canada and really how you found yourself in New Brunswick coming from Bermuda. What's the story?
Well, there's a long, long history of connection between Bermuda and the Maritimes. And it has to do with sailing and nautical history. It has to do with the fact that you can get on a plane, and if they're flying straight to Bermuda, it's going to take you less than 2 hours, right, to get there. Mid-Atlantic, right? So we shared common bonds then, but I must admit, it was always about, for me, being at Mount St. Agnes, the names of Atlantic Canadian universities were what I heard, in high school, because as you may know, the Sisters of Charity from Halifax were the teachers at Mount St. Agnes, right?
Okay.
And would reference Halifax all the time.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, and would reference Mount St. Vincent, for sure, as a Catholic university. I guess I might have thought, well, let's give that a break. Having been in Catholic school all those years, maybe try something else. But someone mentioned to me about Mount Allison, and the way that they put it in Bermuda was, it was a, Sharon, it's a small university. It's a place for, you could sort of navigate that. It's not a great big university that would be hard for someone coming from a very small island to navigate. So those were the influences, I think. But I explained to you that when I got to Mount A, I craved that cosmopolitan connection that I was able to get it down.
I'm so thankful for being a native Nova Scotian and being able to grow up in such a wonderful place. And I'm so immensely proud of being Nova Scotian. But as you know all too well, I do like to tease you and Dad about the fact that your first Canadian winter was in New Brunswick and he was in Manitoba of all places. And somehow the two of you stuck it out and stayed here.
Yes.
Turning back and running back to the sandy beaches of the Caribbean. So I think that your fortitude should be recognized.
and let me tell you, Bermudians would want me to correct you, because Bermuda
right.
is not part of the Caribbean.
Yes, I know.
It's semi-tropical, but yes, I hear you. And yeah, but no, that didn't faze us at all. After your dad had spent all those years in Manitoba walking in that kind of cold, Nova Scotia was not too difficult. But and he taught me a lot about it. I was still wearing inappropriate shoes and that sort of thing. We met and he said, look, if you're gonna walk to school, if you're gonna manage the ice and the snow, you better get some warm boots and some good, he's always been practical. So yeah, we but what was really good was to be able to be part of to be part of a community, to be part of, to add our voices to the piece. And the two of us have to work too hard to understand each other's worldview. We shared a worldview. His experiences in Antigua actually were very different than mine in Nova Scotia, but what we both understood was that we were children of the civil rights movement. We're the same age, the same influences. Politically, we are aligned, and so being here was where we wanted to be for all of those reasons, that we saw that we might be able to do some good. And Sister Karen wanted to know about my early involvement in health.
Yes.
Which I think she may mean as a policy person in the Department of Health. I think she may mean that. Karen, do let me know if that's what you're asking. But my early experiences with the health system influenced my interest in public policy. But then, having been a policy researcher, understanding health inequities all around, and understanding also that Black people weren't showing up in health policy priorities, that bugged me. That bugged me. So yes, it was understanding the health system and understanding where we were not in it. That's, you know, that fire in the belly was as I say, was burning long ago, long before I ever, ever came to Canada. But it was burning pretty hot when I was able to live in and understand the inequities of the system. Yeah.
Being politicized and if I can say perhaps radicalized, from a young age, and then pursuing your post-secondary education, can you talk even just for a minute or two just about sort of your time academically, your time spent at Mount Allison and then perhaps at Dalhousie, about what you were choosing to study, what spoke to you in terms of the courses you were taking? Obviously, you ended up pursuing political science. Is that something that you in fact knew you were going to do at the outset? Is that something you studied at Mount A? Maybe you could.
Yeah, I knew right from the beginning that if I was going to go to university, and it was a question. I didn't always know that I would even get in. And we as Black people have to fight that imposter syndrome thing where you think, well, am I really up to it? Can you believe it? Even then, I was questioning whether I would have what it took to go to university and complete it. And I thought, that political science would be a place where, or an area in which I could learn what I needed to learn about the theory of politics. I was very excited by that. I wanted to understand political ideology. So I spent a lot of time reading political philosophers, as well as which married my interest in civil rights, reading Baldwin, reading the books and the stories of the movement, reading that, as well as political ideology and political philosophy. Was where I started at Mount A. When I moved to Dal, I learned very much about politics of the African diaspora. So I learned a bit about African politics, which is very complex. I learned a bit about Caribbean politics. And I read a lot about Cuba. And boy, I was educated about that because, we all have what we have, which is the information that comes across the television to you about Castro and Cuba and so on. And but I learned the history of the revolution in Cuba. I understood far more than I would have thought that I would understand about socialism, about struggles, about the things that unite us across the African diaspora. And darling, that we took you to Cuba and when you were 15, so that you could be exposed to a different way of life, a different structure of government. And so, we that was I felt an education for you it, you know, and I was able to see for myself, certainly the hardships of the Cuban people, absolutely, but also the, you know, the extraordinary, I'm gonna lead people to think I'm socialist. I'm actually not, but what I am is someone with a pretty developed social conscience. So what I saw there was, I was impressed by the high literacy rate. I think the literacy rate was something like 98% at the time that we were there. And I also understood that the primary healthcare models in Cuba were very interesting. You know, having had that history in university and at Dal, I was able to you know, see those pictures of Castro and you know, and the revolution, and kind of understand where it was all coming from. And also, you know, other parts of the, you know, that was Latin America, but all kinds of history around the Caribbean and the extraordinary leaders in the Caribbean over many years. And of course, I was very familiar with Bermuda, but American politics was also got my attention. And I really had a good grounding, if you like, in the history of the United States, and the struggle, the ongoing struggle of African Americans to find justice. And the more I learned about health policy, the more grateful I was that we live in Canada and have a publicly funded health system, because you know, all of that education comes together, right, in my work then and in my community work now. I that was long-winded, Chris. I don't know if I even got anywhere near answering what you asked me, but I hope I did.
No, you absolutely did. And remember, Mom, this is a celebration of you. It's all about you. So everything is relevant, and it's I'm sure everyone is enjoying it, but selfishly, I'm very much enjoying it, because I think it's you know, I'm just so happy to learn a little bit deeper about what you were studying and what spoke to you. And this, you know, I firmly believe this has all informed your career path and where you are today. So I think it's
and let me just say, I don't know if you're going to ask me about getting work in Nova Scotia, but there's an important piece of that I want to share with people.
Please go ahead.
I believe in the we, not the me. Okay, so this is very hard to be talking about. I want to talk about us. But anyway, in the situation that I found myself in, having graduated from Mount St. Agnes, having graduated from Dalhousie, and my marks were high enough that I could have been on the dean's list. I probably was when I graduated. I had to learn to get there. I wasn't always that great of a student, but by the time I'd done my MA and written my thesis, and it didn't hurt one bit that your dad would study for 8 hours a day and hardly leave the Carol, right? And I was his girlfriend and then his fiance. So hey, I had to hit the books too, or else what would I be doing, right? So there you go. He was a very good influence on that. But anyway, I don't know, where was I going? What was your question?
You said that you and I agree, this is very important. You said that you wanted to maybe spend a few minutes talking about.
That's right.
You know, between the graduation of university and pursuing your career, and what that was like, and what that I think continues to be like for many of us.
Yeah. So I couldn't find a job worth a damn. Okay, I could not find work in this province. Master's degree, honors degree, all that. Couldn't do a thing. I applied for 70 jobs in this province. I was screened in for many of them. And then I would go to the interview and I would not get the job. And I would be told that I wasn't a good fit, that there was somebody else who perhaps was just that little bit more equipped to do the work. And I knew that with a name like Davis-Murdoch, they weren't expecting to see me.
Mhm.
And it was when they saw me that the job was no longer available. Surely, if I was screened in, it was because I had the qualifications. But no, was what it was like. Letter after letter, not letter, nothing actually. So you'd phone and you'd say, well, you know, what had that? Well, no, I'm very sorry, you know, you were not the successful candidate. You know, I was, you know, it was tough. It was tough. And I do want to say that eventually I just, I had taken in my gap year. I had sold ads at Bermuda Broadcasting Company. I would sell television and radio ads. And so I wanted to have some job, you know, work experience before I went to university. And so I had that. I had the education. I had, you know, that year of experience. And all of the summers that I would go back to Bermuda, I would work at you know, as a we'd call them account executives selling ads. So I had that. So I applied because what else can you do? I couldn't find work anywhere. So I applied to sell ads for a newspaper.
Mhm.
And eventually I got the job because I called the guy every day for a week. And I said, I could sell ads. I know I could sell ads. I'm educated. Can I please just have a chance? Every day for a week I called him. And he said, look, if you're this persistent, I'll let you try. And so I did. I sold ads at the newspaper. And while I was doing it, I was thinking to myself, this just isn't right. This is not right. My parents didn't struggle this long to send me to Mount St. Agnes and for me to go to university so that I could end up selling ads with an MA in political science. This just can't be right. So I took myself off to Dalhousie because I had heard that at Dalhousie they had somebody in place called a diversity and equity officer.
Mhm.
And I called that person, I called that office, and I just asked if that person would be willing to meet me because I needed some advice. And it was on that day that I walked into the office of Her Honor, Mayanne Francis, who was then the equity officer. And she gave me some advice, but she was so kind and so helpful. And it was because after leaving her office, and there were some months that went by, but Her Honor called me at home. She'd stayed in touch with me, and she said to me, Sharon, there's a position, a policy position, and they were asking me if I knew anybody who wasn't white who might be qualified. And Chris, from that day to this, Her Honor has been a dear friend and mentor to me.
Mhm.
And I have said it publicly, and I will say it again, that there would have been no me without her. And she knows that. And so for everybody online, you know, it's very important that that we lift as we climb and that we help each other. But it was necessary in my life to be helped, because I might have still been selling ads with my MA, right? So that's what I wanted to say. And along the way, after that, didn't I meet so many others? I was inspired by Senator Wanda Thomas Bernard. When I entered university at Dal, she was doing her thing. She was the first Black professor. We'd heard about her, John and I, and we were so impressed. And we would learn more and more and more about African Nova Scotians and their struggles and their work and their fortitude. And we were so impressed by that. And we wanted to be part of the solution. But it began there. Yeah.
It's I thank you for that, Mom, immensely, because it's such an important point and such a prime example of you know, the kind of thing that you're talking about, and I think it's great to illustrate that, and I really appreciate you mentioning that. Certainly, you know, I know that is a story that you told me at a young age, I think, to help me understand what those struggles can be like, and you know, that's something I've always really appreciated. I know that we are getting closer to the end of our allotted time, and I have 3 more questions that I would like to ask you. And these, if you will, are perhaps a bit more hard-hitting questions, if you like. And the first one is perhaps a bit general, so you can think about it in terms of your professional life, your personal life, what have you. I think whatever way you want to go with it is great. But just wondering, what challenges would you say that you have faced, and what challenges do you continue to face in your life now?
Well, the challenges were always about having to, did you say throughout my life, or did you say in my career?
I think either is fine. These,
okay.
You know, these are questions that it was recommended to me to ask you.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, with respect to the person who drew up the questions and gave them to me, I think that whatever route you would like to go to answer this question, I would be interested to hear.
So here it is. I spent all of my life, it seemed to me, fighting for justice. The challenges never went away. When I was 8 years old in Mount St. Agnes, and you know, I was learning about more and more injustice. I would ask the religious, the nuns, and we had priests who taught us, and we had lay people as well. And I would ask about these injustices, and it was clear that people didn't want to go there. They didn't want to go there, particularly if there was a racial component. It was like, you know, well, you know, yes, these things happen, you know, it is true, but you know, but like, let's get on with something else, you know. And so I would deal with that. I grew up knowing that the war in Vietnam was raging, and I wondered about the injustice of African-American soldiers who would come home to the United States and not be able to get jobs and were treated with disrespect. I would ask about that and get pushback. It didn't change when I left Mount St. Agnes at 18. I mean, I'd done that all through my school years, and went to university. Well, people would answer those questions in university, and sometimes, you know, with a breadth of knowledge and history and literary, not literature, but literature on these subjects that would be very helpful to my own understanding and education. But it was when I finally got out of selling the ads, where there was a lot of overt racism and sexism, let me tell you.
Mhm.
Lots of that.
Mhm.
Lots of pictures of scantily clad women all around me because my colleagues were men.
Yeah.
And you know, that in itself is so depleting and harassing. But I needed to get a paycheck, and so went through that. But when I finally got policy jobs, and when I was a public servant, in referencing inequity, it would be understood, tolerated, but if I started to talk about racism, there was pushback, pushback, pushback. Nobody wanted to talk about racism. It was like, let's talk about, you know, we can talk about the social determinants of health, and culture is part of that. And, you know, no reference to anti-Black racism, no reference to racism.
Mhm.
And there was discomfort in the room. And if we talked about systemic racism, or if I talked about it, because there were very few people talking about it when I was I'm sure I was the first, if not, I'm sure as one of, if not the first, Black policy analyst in Nova Scotia government, right? That just, I did not find people who were doing what I was doing in the government at the time. And when I would talk about that, there was and I talk about that racism was systemic, then people's pushback would be, you're saying that we're all racist. We're not all racist. And I would say, no, no, no. You have to understand what systemic structural racism is. Please let me, you know. But there was pushback, pushback, pushback.
Mhm.
And that is the experience that I have had when, and fighting for 22 years in Hawk for us to collect data with race, ethnicity, and language identifiers so we could see the health disparities and inequities, and the system would have to respond to them.
Mhm.
That there was pushback so much, there was so much stonewalling. Chris, I'm telling you, you wouldn't believe it. There was every way you could find to say no without overtly saying no.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that just continued and continued.
Mhm.
So the challenges of having to, you know, even to talk about cultural competence and identify racism within it, because cultural competence isn't without an examination of the inequities caused by racism. And I would identify that, and then it was not as good a sell. So yes, challenges, challenges, challenges. Speaking truth to power. Always did it respectfully, have survived to talk about it, but things that are in place now to hear that kind of clear messaging and straightforward talk were not in place.
Mhm.
When throughout my policy career, it was one hell of an uphill climb. And so I work in community now, speaking my truth with all of these many beautiful people that are joining us this evening, helping and supporting me and supporting us to get where we need to go. And you haven't asked, but where we need to go is to, you know
That's
me,
okay.
where
That's
we
okay.
need to go, where we need to go is we need to build Black health infrastructure in this province and in Canada, informed by information and evidence that drives policy. We need to see our people represented at every level of the health system and the highest levels as well. We need to be administrators. We need to be in charge of all of the things that are necessary to be in charge of as part of this health system. It doesn't have to be only us, but we need to be there. Nothing about us without us. That's the way we see it. And so that fight continues, but we have lots of friends and we have now ears to hear. Well, thank God for that. Thank God for that.
And thank you for that, Mom. And unsurprisingly, in your answer, you have already, I believe, answered my follow-up question to you, which I have been asked to ask you. What have you done for the betterment of Nova Scotia? Specifically, what have you done for the betterment of the province that has never been seen before? And I think that you have already alluded to that multiple times. So if there's anything you'd like to add to what you've already
I would like to add something, because
Yes,
it's the brotherhood who has invited us here tonight.
Yes, that's right.
And you will remember, Christopher, that, and I love to tell this story. Dad and I were upstairs in the bedroom, and I was ironing, because, you know, I used to do a lot of ironing on the weekend because you had to have all the stuff ready for the week. You know, I'm all about preparation, as you know, Chris. And there I was ironing my clothes for work, and CNN was on, and they talked about Black health. And on that occasion, we learned about Project Brotherhood on the south side of Chicago. And I looked at your dad and I said, we have got to go to Chicago to look at that model. Aren't we supposed to go to Chicago for one of your conferences, John? And he says, yeah, that's what's on the list for the next conference. I said, well, let me tell you, I'm going over there. I'm going to see that model and I want to tell people about it. And that is what we did. I got in a taxi. They didn't even want to take me to the south side of Chicago. We had to argue with them that, you know, take us in the daytime, because they can't get a cab to take you from our hotel to the south side. We went there and we talked to those guys who were the head of Project Brotherhood. And in fact, I looked at their model. I looked at this amazing primary healthcare model where Black men who had nothing, were from gang-infested neighborhoods, were very often addicted, living in poverty, every conceivable thing against them. Not only all of that, but also living with living with a criminal justice system that targeted Black men, and all of that. And so I was able to ask these men, I said, look, your model is fantastic. We are seeing more and more gun violence in Nova Scotia. And if you don't mind, I would very much like to go back and talk to my higher ups at the Department of Health and Wellness, because I think we could have a model like this in Nova Scotia. And they said, you know, we you go ahead and do that. And I said, would you be willing, if I was able, would you be willing to come to Nova Scotia and talk about your model? They say, yeah, sure we would. And within a year, I had the support of fantastic leaders at the Department of Health and Wellness who agreed to bring those guys here. And they spoke at the Black Cultural Center. They spoke to 300 people at the Black Cultural Center. They spoke to Department of Health and Wellness staff. They spoke to people, they spoke to young people. We had it all they spoke to public servants as well. And it was as a result of that the Nova Scotia Brotherhood Initiative was born in this province. And I'm telling you, that is my shining pride. They do it, I don't do it. And we have been instrumental and have been fighting for a sisterhood, because it is far high time. And you've heard me say it, that the sisters also benefit from such a model that is gender and culturally specific. But I tell you, if there isn't anything else that fills me with joy, it is to see the Brotherhood continue to meet the needs of Black men and improve health outcomes for our people. Yeah.
That's excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm glad that I made sure to ask you that question, even though you had already mentioned several things that you had done, to give us an opportunity to talk about the Brotherhood, because it's so incredible, the fact that we have a Nova Scotia Brotherhood now, and obviously it's so fitting to have you elaborate on the story behind that. So thank you for that, Mom. That's wonderful. I only have one final question to ask you. Again, feel free to go where you want to go with this one. Think about it in whatever terms you like. But the question is, what are your intentions over the next 5 years, if you will, to broaden your horizon of achievements? Or it could be to broaden the horizon of achievements for our community. Again, go whatever direction you want to go with it, but that is the final question.
I truly believe that no success is possible unless it is collective. And what I want is to see our people in places of decision-making at every level of the health system. I want to see our health improve. I want us to have culturally specific models. At the very basis of it, the equity equality argument is the stumbling block in Canada. Equality is a wonderful thing, in that it means that everybody is treated the same. And many people will articulate, we want the same. But I would argue that equity is about justice. And that means that our system, that our culturally specific opportunities for programming, for policies, for funding happen differently. They may look different from other populations. They may look different from the mainstream, because they need to be fair and just and to meet our needs, because we are disproportionately, as people across the African diaspora, we are disproportionately impacted by chronic disease, by poor health outcomes, by the structural and social determinants of health. And above all things, we are impacted by anti-Black racism, which has its tentacles in all of those. And so I want to see us get justice, get equity at every level, and more and more and more more people are moving in that direction. I see so many young people now in the health professions as students. I see so many young Black lawyers. I see so many people who are now judges in Nova Scotia, Black judges. I see educators. We have done very well with educators, and now you, Chris, are among those in education. And but more is needed. More is needed, and equity doesn't look in the future like, or put it this way, the future I am looking forward to is different in terms of how equity looks. It is improved, it is expanded, it is just and fair and representative.
Thank you, Mom. Thank you so much for that. I want to say that I think first and foremost, I want to thank you for your time, even though I'm your son, so I have the luxury of your time. But in all seriousness, Mom, thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you for illustrating your foundation, laying the foundation of where you come from, talking about your journey, talking about looking toward the future. It's just wonderful to hear again, even me as someone who has a lot of insight into a lot of what you're talking about from our past conversations and my whole life. This still was just such a rich experience for me. So thank you for that. Thank you for what you have done for the African Nova Scotian community. Thank you for choosing Nova Scotia to be your home, which means that it is my home and it is a place that I love and cherish. And again, I want to thank Dwayne and the Nova Scotia Brotherhood for putting this on. I'm going to turn things back to Dwayne in just a second. But you better believe I'll take the opportunity to close by saying to you something that an interviewer so rarely gets to say to the subject of the interview, which is that I love you so much and I love you unconditionally. And I'm so proud of you and everything that you've done. And I am just so immensely thankful that I get to be your son. Well, thank you, Mom. Wayne, I'll turn things over to you.
Can't speak.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Sharon, thank you. I'm sure if everyone could give you an applause right now, they would. You're absolutely amazing. Hard for me to be speechless, which is, it's rare. But
Well, my son will do that too.
and Chris, thank you. This has been an amazing opportunity to learn so much. What can I say? Enough of the speaking. Sharon, you need to write a book.
I want to hear from other folk. I would just love to hear the voices of some of the people that I love so much.
The floor is now open to anyone who has questions and wants to talk. Please, let's enjoy this moment.
Sharon,
Yeah.
it's Alicia and Mama Joan here.
Oh,
We're sending you lots of love.
thank
You for your passion and your innovative work and leadership. Thank you for being a sister friend, for being there for me all the time. We love you very much. And we know that only good things will continue to happen to you. God bless you.
And what a legacy for the grandkids, Sharon, that you bestowed on them.
y'all
feel
feel my love. I just love you guys to death. I just love you so much. Thank you for that. Thank you. Anybody have a question or comment about your work? Because hey, we got all this attention, so y'all can use this time to talk about your stuff that you're doing.
There's actually a question here.
Okay.
To speak about the cultural competency guidelines, you wrote the first provincial guidelines for cultural competency and delivery of primary health care in Canada.
So what would the question be then? Is the question all right, I'll tell you what cultural competence is. You all know this, many of you know this already, but from my standpoint, I'll give you the 30-second if that's where we're going. Cultural competence is building the awareness, knowledge, skills, and policies needed to serve people across their diversity. The guidelines provided the system with ways in which that could happen. And what cultural competence looks like at the end of the day is it looks like understanding the history and lived experience of the people that you serve, whoever they happen to be, all of them. It is understanding that one size will never fit all. That's why culturally specific care delivery, service, programs need to be in place. And it is understanding that different people have different needs, including being able to diagnose, being able to treat, to being able to understand the health needs of the people that you serve. So clinical cultural competence is needed to serve our people, to understand skin disorders, to look at how you can prescribe drugs, because not all drugs behave the same way in all bodies. You have to have clinical competence around this. And the word competence is about that comes from the health system. Every clinician understands that in order to be competent, one has to continue working. It isn't that you get the competence and it's done. It's ongoing, continuous, lifelong work to maintain competence. And that is what I feel we need in the health system. And that is where I was coming from when I brought to senior leadership at the Department of Health and Wellness the opportunity to approve cultural competence guidelines for the Nova Scotia health system. I believe in that conceptual framework. I think we can use it in all kinds of different ways. But more than anything, I am a policy animal. I believe in the power of good policy, good public policy. And that is part and parcel of the delivery of cultural competence, individually, across society, and across the health system and the structures of the health system. So I think that's as much as I can get out in a short time. Thank you for asking.
There's a question there from Dr. Dryden.
Sister Omi Sheree, where are you? There you are.
Hi, you can hear my voice. Can you see me there? Hi.
Yes,
Hello.
yes.
Hey, Dwayne, how are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. This was so great. I just have to say thank you so much. It was lovely. And sharing the stories, my God, we were crying and laughing and all of that. And it was lovely to see your son and just witness, just the deep love and respect he has, for you and the way your family works and all of that. I just wanted to thank you. We met before I even moved to Halifax. I was still in Toronto and I was working on a grant. And we had I reached out to speak to you about something, and your generosity from the very beginning around, just helping me to situate myself in Nova Scotia, within a Nova Scotia setting, and providing me even further clarifications around, unique specialness of African Nova Scotians. So I had some information, but you really provided that to me generously, and your generosity has not ended. And so I don't have a question. I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for the ways in which you've, supported me when I arrived, but the ways in which you lead, right? The ways and your ability to kind of see the whole picture and then help us, muddle our way through the forest. You can see the path. There isn't the path. You're like, here's a machete. Let's create the path. So I just want to say thank you for that, because there, as you know, when you do this work, there's moments where you're just like, I'm tired. I need to lay down and eat all the cookies. And you're like, grab some water, get a nap, see you tomorrow. Let's try this again. And so I want to thank you for that. It's I know it's enriched my work and it's enriched so many others, and you deserve this and all of the accolades. So thank you so much.
Well, Sister Omi Sheree and Gwen, you're my heart. You're my heart, and I can't do this without you. We need to be together, and all of us. We have, this is a great big piece, and there's enough work and enough opportunity for everybody who wants to be part of the picture. So, but that, and I knew who you were the minute I spoke to you, and you know, I can't be without you. So stay close, okay?
You know, we just in the middle of it. We got time. We got things to do.
That's
Roll
right.
up my sleeves.
That's right. Thank you so much.
And take good care. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any more questions for Sharon here?
Yeah, I do. If possible, it's not really so much a question as much of a comment. Sorry, this is Collins here.
Hey there.
Hello, my name's Collins Ellison. I'm a student at NSCC, and I just wanted to thank you so much for your influence on Chris. I know I don't know you personally, but I've met Chris several times at this point, and you know I can see where he gets his upstanding sense of morality. Is definitely a sense of compassion, and definitely even more so his invaluable insight into a lot of the influences that have greatly affected myself as an African Nova Scotian. And yeah, I just wanted to thank you so much, because I feel your influence is ever present to this day, however much you may not know, but it definitely is. So thank you. And I would just want to give a quick shout out to Chris too, because he's an excellent advisor and an excellent person. So thank you.
Well, I want to thank you. And I couldn't even speak when my son was speaking. I was so emotional. But I know who Chris is. I know who he is. And yes, he was raised right, but you can do your best as a parent to raise somebody. That doesn't mean that they're going to turn out with the integrity and the generosity of spirit and he is not afraid of hard work, nor is he afraid to embrace everyone. And he is a good man. And I am so proud of him.
Absolutely.
So thank you for giving me the opportunity to say back to my son how much I love him.
Oh, thank you for being that great influence, that great mother.
Thank you, Mom, and thank you, Collins. You know, I just want to quickly say that's very nice of you to mention that, Collins. And honestly, being able to make a connection with somebody like you as part of the role of what I get paid to do every day that just means that I've won the lottery in life. So I appreciate your kind words, but you know, if anything, I would just say right back at you. It's amazing that as part of what I do for my 9 to 5 is that I get to meet and make a connection with someone like yourself. So right back at you, my friend. I appreciate it.
And John is here. He just came home from the hospital. So say hello to everybody, John.
Hi, everybody.
Got the whole family now.
I've been hiding in the background, listening for a while. I didn't get home until about 20 minutes ago, but hey, I caught enough of it.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Cheers.
I guess thank you to Pops there too for his influence. But thank you again.
So there's another question. I don't know. Do we have time?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, certainly, go ahead.
So wellness navigator, whoever you are, Elizabeth, will you not ask that in the way that can I not hear you? And I'll do my best to answer, or at least give you some response to what you're asking. Can I hear you? No?
Hi, Sharon. I've been dying to meet you. I'm the wellness navigator and for the Brotherhood, and I must say thank you.
Fantastic!
Thank you for all the wonderful things that you do and continue to do. I'm coming from Ghana. I did come to Canada as an international student as well, and nursing is my background. It's just that being here, I do see a lot of divide among us Black folks. And so I was wondering what your advice would be or what we could do to be united. And I look forward to that happening where we would all see ourselves as one, regardless of where we're coming from. And so I was wondering what you think we could do as a people to be united.
Well, that's not the easiest question, but I appreciate where you're coming from, Elizabeth, and I thank you for the question. Let me just say, I was not born in Nova Scotia, and I know that. I own that. But Nova Scotia is my home. 40 years, 43 years, in fact, I have been here. My child is here, my grandchildren are here. This is where I am. Having said that, I understand that it takes nothing from any of us to understand who we are and what we have accomplished and and basically what our identity is in this province. I have always respected African Nova Scotians who are the descendants of generations. I understand that history. I'm not an expert on it, but I respect it. And as a migrant, my family has moved from many places over many years. I understand that it is only right that those people who have been here for generations are respected for their contribution and their history. Cultural competence and my worldview is that we don't have to be the same to be part. You can be your own person and you can have your own heritage and still be supportive and part of the overall. I think that systems have made it difficult for all of us to get what is our just reward, if you like. And so what that means is that historically, African Nova Scotians have seen people come in from other places and for whatever reason have been able to navigate jobs. There's also and opportunities. There's also the divide and conquer that is a reality of racism. So I reject that. I reject the divide and conquer. And I see that many of us across the African diaspora have something to bring. I also want a system that has enough opportunities that all of us can have what we deserve to have. We should not take from one in order for the other to have. We should all have. And I think it is in that worldview that I continue to work. I respect the history of people who have been here. I understand it. I don't want to get in the way of it. I want to perhaps add my voice and enhance those opportunities like we're doing at Dalhousie School of Health Professions. I don't see the need to stand in front of anybody. I see the opportunity to stand beside other people and add and enhance. And so that's where I'm coming from. And I think that perhaps now more than any other time, the collective power of people of African ancestry is needed to move to the future that I would like to see. There is space for all of us. We need to make space and take space, and we need to support one another. We don't have to be the same. We just have to have the same goals and the same worldviews, if you like. That's the way that I see it, Elizabeth. And there's no magic bullet here, but that's how I hope. That's how I try to live, and that's how I see us moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else have oh, Joe Colley? Is it Joe was clapping or question, Joe?
No, actually, this is wonderful, wonderful engagement. I'm loving this. And I would actually, no questions. Just want to repeat something you said earlier. I need to see a book. I really, really do. Let me bring my picture up, see if you recognize me. I'm from the music world. Anyway, no, I'd like to see a book, and hopefully you're going to do one soon because your presentation is awesome.
Joe, you look very familiar to me. I think you are a man of faith, a beautiful man of faith.
Yes,
I appreciate you, Joe. I appreciate you.
Oh, yes, and likewise, I'm telling you, I'm really impressed. And Chris's mannerism, oh my goodness, what a chip off of the old block.
We should all be blessed with such children.
Oh,
But,
and Garrett, no word of lie, I had them also. Like I said, a parenting is very important.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Joe. Thank you all. Thank you.
Is it time for supper?
I think so. So once again, I want to thank you, Sharon, for everything you do, everything you stand behind. Thank you, Chris, for the great work you've done tonight. And once again, I want to apologize for the late start. Something happened with the Zoom to do with the weather, so my apologies again. But Carla Williams from Hawk, she saved the day, so thank you.
As she often does,
Yes.
does. We love her. Thank you,
Amazing,
Carla.
amazing people. We work together well, and that's all that matters, right?
Yeah.
So Sharon, thank you again, and I continue to look forward to working with you, and we have so much more to accomplish.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, son. Love y'all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mom.
Okay.
Night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.